Welcome.
Hey.
Deposit for me. Straight from the nation's capital. It's
That's right.
Me, Hannah.
And me.
My buddy, Andrew.
Hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's pretty good.
Good.
We're here to talk about a really interesting Canadian indie film that we watched recently called I Like Movies.
It was really interesting.
Do you like movies?
Uh-huh. I love movies.
Cool.
Yeah. Watching Goodfellas is better than jerking off.
You know what? To some people, I bet that's, we should. I never finished Goodfellas.
So before we even dive into talking about this movie, let's talk about who this movie is for, or at least who I feel like would enjoy this movie.
I don't think it's for everyone.
I think in my Letterboxd review, I called it Lady Bird for Canadian Film Bros, or something to that effect.
It's very specific.
Yeah.
Like if you were a film nerd in the 2000s, that's
2010s.
really gonna resonate with you. Like growing up in Canada in the 2000s in like Ontario, it was like, oh, like he's watching TV and the Cashman thing came on. Oh, he's going to the video store. Like just being in like school and communications class, like using really old software and everything crashing.
Yeah.
Lauren P got Final Cut Pro for her birthday.
Oh, so lucky.
I know.
Back when Final Cut Pro wasn't dead in the industry, as it was according to our professors who were teaching it to us at the time. Like, yeah, nobody uses this. Let me show you how to use it.
We were the last year to use it.
Yeah, the year after us got to learn Premiere. I had to learn Premiere on my own.
Yeah. Well, that was 2014, whereas I think the movie takes place in like 2001, 2004.
It was when Punch Drunk Love came out, which I think is like 2004.
Standard, yeah.
Yeah. It was a good time. So, like, the comparison to Lady Bird, it really was that, like, transitionary period. I think they were both in the mid-2000s, took place in the mid-2000s.
Yes.
About the time in your life when you're transitioning from high school to college, you're maybe abandoning some of your old friends, finding new friends, that kind of thing.
Figuring out your true identity.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of, what they were saying is like, oh, I think your personality will fit better in college because he's kind of a jerk, like kind of douchey to people.
I think I was kind of like halfway to him when I was transitioning from high school to college. Don't worry, we're going to cut all that out.
Yeah.
And we're going to cut in on me saying, don't worry, we're going to cut all that out. So the audience isn't going to know what just happened. You guys are going to be completely in the dark.
That's right.
Okay, what were we saying?
I think if...
You got a boo-boo in your hand. Go ahead.
I think if you are a nerd in high school, then you kind of want to try to make yourself feel superior over others. So then you kind of feel like, oh, there's a reason people don't like me. Is because I'm better than everyone else.
Is that how you felt?
Well, not necessarily, but to like the nth degree that I feel like maybe in retrospect, in some ways, I maybe came off like I was better than other people because I was interested in different things and I wasn't interested in what they were interested in.
Well, it's like a defense mechanism. I'm going to, for the third time, and I apologize, point your microphone closer to your mouth. Thank you. I feel like it's a defense mechanism. Like I've learned, especially as I've gotten older, that when someone criticizes something, unless it's coming from like a really honest place of like wanting that thing to be better and wishing it was better, like criticizing a movie and being like, oh, it was so good, but if the music had just been that much more memorable, or like something like that.
Constructive criticism.
Constructive.
Yeah.
If someone's criticizing something and it's not constructive, more than likely they're doing it so that they can find a way to feel better about themselves. This is where you see a lot of like online arguments about is like, if you play a video game and you don't like it, but you see other people online like it, you feel like you've done something wrong. You're like, other people like this, but I didn't. What's wrong with me? So then you try and flip the script and like insult the game and insult people who like the game because you're like, there's nothing wrong with me. There must be something wrong with other people. right? So I feel like that's kind of the attitude that a character like this has, is like they're not getting invited to parties. So it's like, well, something must be wrong with them because I'm cool, you know.
They don't like movies, so I don't want to be friends with them.
I couldn't possibly be the one who's wrong in this situation, so I'm just going to lash out and insult people, you know?
I think that's
Have we
normal.
gotten too deep too early?
A human experience. I think everyone feels that way, though, because I think as you're an adult, you become more comfortable with who you are and you find more people in your community that resonate with you, especially in the age of the internet, maybe in 2004 when the internet was still relatively new. It would have been harder for him to find a film community that he can resonate with. And that's probably why he said to his friend that wasn't as into film as him, is you're a placeholder friend. And maybe that is the case. Well,
you shouldn't say that.
No. There's some people you're friends with in high school because it's the place and time, and like you kind of have some things in common, but they're like not really your people. And then when you go to college, where it's a subject that you're all learning together, that you all have a shared interest in right away, it's a lot easier for you to find people that actually share those interests as you.
Definitely.
But saying to someone, we're only friends because of circumstances is very rude.
Yeah. I realized we completely skipped over the log line, which in this case I think is important because this is going to be a less popular film than
for sure,
Murder on the Orient Express or Death on the Nile or whatever. I keep defaulting to Murder on the Orient Express.
Still have it on the board.
Fixed.
Yeah.
So I like movies. It came out, I guess 2 years ago now, 2022. We're just into 2024.
I saw it recently come up on Netflix. Maybe they just acquired a deal.
Right. By Canadian filmmaker Chandler Levack, who I thought was a man, but is in fact a
female.
Woman. Yeah.
Even more. When I found that out, I found that really interesting because to me, it felt like a very personal film. Like it was the filmmaker's own experience, and maybe it was, but I found it really interesting that it was a female, and I'm so into celebrating female directors. Definitely. Especially Canadian indie female directors, so I was really happy to find that out. But it was really interesting because I was like, a female director, doing such a male experience, like the two younger characters are male. Of course you have like the supportive employer role, but it doesn't feel like it's coming from as personal of a place. It's more like high level.
Yeah, I think I read that the director Chandler Levack said that she didn't want to make the movie about a female character because she didn't want female directors to feel pigeonholed into only being able to do movies about female characters.
Yeah. Greta Gerwig kind of has been pigeonholed with that because you have Lady Bird,
maybe
Little Women, Barbie. Yeah, no, that's
seems
great.
Her prerogative to tell very female-oriented stories, which is great.
Yeah, I'm all for that. Is women doing whatever they want to do.
So the log line.
Yeah.
So basically, in my own words, I would say it's about a kid who lives in Burlington. Is trying to save up... That's the real
capital.
Yeah. He's trying to save up $90,000 to go to NYU. Mm-hmm. And he's trying to do so while working at basically a Blockbuster.
Where he probably made like $5 an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
IMDb says it thusly. Lawrence Queller, a socially inept 17-year-old cinephile, gets a job at a video store where he forms a complicated friendship with his older female manager. So a lot of people are comparing this to Licorice Pizza. Licorice Pizza. I can say movies titles correctly. Can you? You say it for me.
Licorice Pizza.
There you go. Not a mushmouth anymore, are you, Pilgrim?
I wouldn't say this is a 1-to-1 comparison because it felt
definitely not. I liked this better than Licorice Pizza actually.
Because in I Like Movies, it felt more like a real coworker experience where you're kind of friends, you share things about your lives together, but you're like you don't actually have that relationship. Whereas in Licorice Pizza, they made it pretty clear that it was like a romantic connection.
I had issues with Licorice Pizza, just that the plot didn't feel like well thought out. I came away from that movie being like, this felt like a biopic, because biopics normally have
sort of was
like poor like pacing and structure like this.
Because they have to follow a real life
it turned
thing.
out it kind of was.
In this, it kind of
detriment.
In this, it felt like it was drawing on real experiences, but it wasn't like, okay, and now the character has to do this, and now it has to do this. It felt like it had a better structure. Like, we meet this character, you know, he has this goal. He wants to get a job. He gets a job. He meets these new people that influence him in a certain way. It helps him push forward to his next goal, to move on to do, you know, to go to college and to be a better person, you know.
I don't want a sequel to this movie, but
No.
I'm curious, like, I mean, assuming it's autobiographical, obviously the director went on to direct stuff, which is great.
Right.
But what I found so interesting about this movie is that the kid obviously wants to go to film school, and he ends up going to Carleton.
Sure.
But he only ever talks about watching movies.
Not making movies.
And
some people are like that.
I think you see a camera in his hand maybe once in the entire movie. You know, as compared to something like Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl, where they're like, or another movie about making movies, Be Kind, Rewind. They're constantly filming stuff. Whereas this was like, he almost felt like he didn't know what it really meant to be a filmmaker, is to, like, not to watch movies, but to make movies.
That was almost compelling in a way, because I feel like that's maybe the position of some 17-year-old cinephiles, is they want to make movies, they want to go to school for it so they know how to do it, because they don't know how to do it. I mean, you see that silly skit at the beginning, but you're right. It's not like in Dawson's Creek, like Dawson is like always filming like some weird film or whatever. It's not like that.
Well,
you know?
Let's compare it to our own journeys, right? Like for you end up going into a film program where you met me.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you felt motivated to go into film because you loved watching films, or because as a preteen kid you would pick up a camera and make stories and have fun and like have fun writing?
It was more the latter. I mean, I liked the former for sure.
Yeah.
It was both. But for me, I always knew that I was destined to a creative path. Like, I just couldn't see anything else for myself. I was always interested in like reading, writing, creative pursuits, being in plays and stuff like that. So I was like, I know I want to do something artistic, whether that was going to school for theater, photography, acting, like that kind of thing, being a writer. Like, I knew I wanted to do something with that. And I had loved picking up a camera and shooting little skits with friends and stuff. And I had always been sort of a go-to camera person, someone that was just instinctively making lots of home movies and compiling them together just for fun. I would like sit and edit like supercut compilations of things for fun. And so to me, just learning about the broadcasting program, knowing that I would get to learn how to edit and use professional software and get hands on like big cameras and get opportunities to do lots of cool stuff. I was like, oh, I want to do this. I want to learn and have these opportunities to do cool stuff. Whereas maybe for some people in the program, they're like, I really like films and I want to make them, ? And I feel like for some people, and you know, no shade to directing, obviously directing is great, but I think a lot of people in the program went into it being like, I want to be a director. And me, knowing that was a little more unrealistic, at least from a high level position. Of course, in small indie films, you can make your own content. But for me, I was like, I want to learn more behind the scene roles, because I know I'll probably have more opportunities to actually do that in real life.
Yeah. When it comes to that topic, and I want to circle back around to your personal journey, but when it comes to that topic, it's interesting because the more directing that I do, I feel like a lot of people have a bit of a misconception about what directing is.
Yeah.
I feel like you see director and you think it's like, it's the person steering the ship.
Yeah.
But that's not always necessarily the case. Sometimes it's the producer steering the ship.
It's a collaborative
sometimes
process.
it's the writer who like sets the scene for everything. But I would say if you're going to get into directing, it's probably because you want to tell stories. But day to day, what a director has to do is oversee the set, obviously, but that can be a producer's role as well. But the thing that the director does that no other department does is work with the actors and really get nice, healthy performances out of the actors. And to a certain extent, I felt like that's kind of what I was after with Coffee to Cocktails. Like, it definitely felt like Coffee to Cocktails was a practice movie.
For sure. Because it's such a small, low budget thing that it was volunteer. So, obviously we want to pay people for their time because creative work is real work, but we couldn't on that small of a scale. So we at least wanted to treat everyone with the respect that they deserve, because we know working in a creative field that it can be tough sometimes and that we can feel less than. Like maybe it's not treated like a real thing sometimes, even though it totally is. So,
And to loop back to I like movies, I feel like if you're going to get into directing, you can have a big vision of a production and a direction to lead the crew in. But if you're going to come at it like Lawrence, just kind of pissing everybody off at every turn, like
acting like you know exactly what you're talking about, even if you maybe don't.
If you don't, yeah.
Or you feel like you're superior, like he didn't want to sell Shrek. He's like, I don't like Shrek. I don't support this. And it's like,
Shrek's awesome.
A lot of people love Shrek. I think I saw on Letterboxd people who are like, the real cinephiles know that Shrek is good.
Yeah.
So it's like, even if you disagree with someone in a creative opinion, you have to at least be able to see eye to eye. That happens a lot in creative fields and just in everyday life, where someone's like, hey, I think this is the best way to do this. And you're like, I don't think so. But you have to be able to compromise or at least see through what they're saying instead of being like, no, that sucks.
Yeah.
Because that's not going to work. That's not like, in creativity, you have to have that collaboration.
Yeah. I feel like that's really what a director's job is like keeping the peace, keeping a strong vision, and being able to help all the pieces of the production click together to move in the direction and get the project to where you want to get it to.
Whereas,
I feel like, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that Lauren P was a good representation of that. Like Lawrence was kind of just being a jerk to everyone, feeling high and mighty, whereas Lauren P was coming like from a very respectful place. She, asked people to do this for her. She was very like, she led with kindness, and she was able to put together something that made people happy.
Yeah. Because you hear stories about famous directors being dicks on set and being overly harsh, overly critical. Like Alfred Hitchcock was famous for like not really respecting actors very much.
It's like, how did they even get there?
Well, but like they and only they can get away with it because they're so famous, because they have such clout, because they have such a strong vision. But if you're starting out like we are, there's no room for that.
There's no room for
it just doesn't
jerks.
work that way.
Because you're spending time on film sets. There's a lot of downtime and a lot of, especially as a director collaborating with actors, you're trying to get something out of them. And if you're pissing them off, like that's probably going to reflect in their performance. I mean, sometimes Alfred Hitchcock and, people like Stanley Kubrick did that on purpose to get a performance out of them. But I feel like that's really emotionally manipulative. Like I think in The Shining, Kubrick was scaring Shelley Duvall to get her into a more frightening performance. And she's great in that. But at what cost? Like, what were those work days like for her? Probably not pleasant.
Exactly. And thinking back to college, like our college experience, the worst directors in our classes were always the ones who had a bad attitude on set and were like too demanding, asked too much, or like felt like they were above everyone else and that their shit don't stank. And the best directors, shout out to Andrew Sheard, were the ones who did a really good job keeping the peace and being nice to people while being able to get the performances that they wanted from the actors and keep the day moving and working with their AD and the producer in that regard.
I think that's really important, particularly for above the line jobs, which are more like the analytical type jobs like director, producer, AD, whereas the below the line jobs are like camera people, gaffer, that kind of thing. Above the line is kind of like the ones steering the ship. And it's even more important that they're very respectful to everyone on set. Like if there's a lower level person that's kind of like being rude, it's like you can maybe brush that off, but like someone that's like dealing with everyone, like that's so crucial. Like it could ruin everyone's mood.
Definitely. So circling back to your experience going into college, I want because we were talking about like getting into filmmaking because we enjoyed picking up a camera and having fun with it. You know,
For sure.
that's why I got into it, is because I like watching movies. It's fun, but there's a thrill that I get unlike no other when we get a cool shot or we film a cool scene and we put together the edit and get to show it to people and watch their reactions. Like
It's
I don't
very
get
personal.
that from anything else. You know,
I was feeling that like when we went to Kino. I was like, people are making these things and then they're showing it to an audience. That's like bearing your soul. Like that's very personal. Like I would almost like feel weird doing that in a way, because I'm hoping to maybe do something for one of them. And I just, kudos to you, because that's really hard to put yourself out there like that. And I think for a lot of people, they're so scared to try that they don't.
It can be hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's really difficult to take that first step, especially when you feel like you don't have access to much. But just remind me, like going into college, because you talked about sort of your decision to go into film.
Mm-hmm.
Can you remind me like what the decision-making process was like to aim yourself at the film stream? Because I know you were looking at different options, whether it was acting or like radio presentation. What was that like for you?
Well, that was partially appealing about the program was, if I didn't do that, I was going to go into theater. And it's like with theater, I knew exactly what to expect, and it would have been just more of what I was already doing in high school. Whereas with broadcasting, I would have hands on a lot of equipment. I would be, dealing with a lot of industry professionals, and I would have a chance to try out radio, television, and film. Because that was part of it, was you did like a whole year of all three, and then you got to decide like two and then one. So I went into it not knowing exactly what stream I wanted to end up in, but I was excited to learn about all three. And I was like, this is sick. Like this is what I want to do. Like I love creative fields. I love doing it through like a digital medium. I'm excited to learn all this stuff.
Yeah. I feel like our program gave us a good idea of what it was like doing most of the individual jobs, like what it's like to light a scene, what it's like to produce
I appreciate
a short
that.
film. But when it came to the directing, I strongly feel that there was way too much emphasis put on the writing and storytelling, and not nearly enough emphasis put on how to actually run the set and how to get the best out of your actors. Like that basically wasn't talked about at all.
Yeah, well, I think if we had gone to a school where it was just all film, then we would have had specific classes where it's like directing classes.
Probably.
But because we went into a program that had like a little bit of everything, we got like a general overview. And I don't regret those decisions, because some of the things I learned in television and radio is still somewhat helpful to me now. Mm-hmm. I would imagine for you too, corporate video has overlap between television and film and dealing with that kind of thing. So
yeah, but I'm obviously still learning like what it means to be a good director. Obviously, back in the day, directing Who's Got the Matches in college, there was certain crew members who weren't too happy with me, and I don't know if that was due to personal social reasons or legitimately because I was doing a bad job on set. But
I don't know.
I know a lot more what it takes to create a better set dynamic, and I try really hard to make sure people on the set are happy, especially if you're working with with volunteer people. If you're going to ask too much of them and you're going to be a dick and you're not going to appreciate everything that they're doing for you, they're not going to come back.
Yeah. They don't have to finish their role. I think in film school, it can be a little more tricky than the real world in some ways because there's a lot of egos.
Yeah.
A lot of people, whether like they're the gaffer or like the boom op, they all have opinions about how things should do. And they're maybe a little bit bitter about being the boom op and not being the director. And everyone kind of wants to have a say and everything takes a lot longer because like no one knows what they're doing. Whereas in real life, if you have professionals that already kind of know what they're doing and they're like, no, I volunteer to do boom op, like that's what I want to do and stuff like that, there's a lot less ego to it and it's more of a collaborative environment. We were on a set recently where it was more like we didn't really know what was going to be shot. We were just kind of in like a certain location and we're like, okay, let's do this idea, let's bounce this around. And that was a lot more fun. Like, okay, what should this line be here? Oh, what should we do next? How should we light this? Whereas maybe in film school, it would be like, I think we should do this, or oh, that light shouldn't be like that because this. And
you have like a 45 minute
yeah.
argument about where the light should be because like everybody feels like they're right. What I liked about, and the set that you're talking about was we shot a short film with Kevin, who we've had on the podcast before, called Discovery. There was like a sci-fi themed story. It was a lot of fun in how collaborative it was because everybody came in with a good attitude. You know,
sure.
Like once one person on a set pipes up with their opinion who's not the director, it almost gives everybody else free rein to throw their hat in the ring.
That's okay if the director allows it.
Yeah. But what was key about Discovery was like there wasn't any animosity when an idea didn't get chosen. You know, like what happened all the time on college sets was it would be like, I think we should do it this way. Well, no, we should really do it this way. Well, I liked my way. And then nothing gets done. Whereas on Discovery, there wasn't really anything like that. It was like, we're going to move forward in this direction. Okay, let's shoot it.
Because we're professionals.
We're older, and we also didn't have time to screw around. We only had about 4 hours in the space.
Yeah.
So.
We are all camera professionals that come from industries of being in locations, having to be in and out, having like super tight turnaround, not really knowing much about the clients, just like getting in and out, getting your shots. Because time is money. Whereas on a student film, you're supposed to faff around because like that's part of the learning process. So a 5-minute film
I suppose,
could take multiple weeks of set design and shooting and getting each of the angles and stuff and really wasting your time on lights and stuff like that. Whereas for something that we worked on, the Discovery film, we had like 4 hours to film like a 5-minute short. Yeah. In school, we literally had like multiple weeks to film a 5 hour or a 5-minute short. Yeah.
Seriously. Yeah.
We built those sets though. That takes a lot of time. Whereas for this, we didn't build the set, but still.
Yeah. So circling back to the movie, I feel like this kind of bad attitude thing that we're talking about is so integral to this character of Lawrence. And it made me self-reflect a lot on how I used to be in high school, how I used to be in college, and how I've been trying to grow since then. Because I did see a lot of myself in Lawrence. Not quite the same.
I felt the same way. Like I maybe felt a little bit like Lawrence too in some ways, especially, you know, as a teen, is I would be interested in things that maybe weren't the mainstream, that my peers weren't watching. And I was like, oh, well, I'm cool. Like I'm watching this cool stuff and you guys aren't. I'm really into Goodfellas. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean, I had trouble connecting with people.
Me too.
Towards the end of high school. And I felt very refreshed being in college around people who were there because they wanted to be there and not because necessarily their parents just Well, some of them, their parents made them.
Yeah.
But, for the most part, it was a lot more people who were there because they wanted to be there and they wanted to learn and they had similar interests. And
for sure,
that ultimately is what I'm glad Lawrence is stepping into at the end of the movie. Because I know...
You really see that growth.
I know he's going to have a better time. And he's changed his attitude for the better.
Well, it was really pivotal, the moments with the boss. She was so good in it, like especially she was describing why
I really liked that actress. Yeah, I want to see her in more stuff.
She was so like fun, and it's like, oh, I can see why Lawrence is into her because she's like kind of cool and different and stuff. And then she explains why she doesn't like movies, and she goes into detail about like her experience with it, and it just felt very emotional and potent without being melodramatic. Like you knew exactly what she was talking about and the emotion really came through, but it wasn't like to the 11th.
Yeah.
It wasn't in the tight close up. It was like we could tell the emotion from, I think it was like maybe a medium. And I think they just did the tone of that scene really well. And I think just that relationship, especially at the end where they have the Subway subs, like they had like such a bad moment together.
Yeah.
And then they have this moment where they kind of reconcile. They have their subs together. She's like, okay, this is what you should do in college. And he actually takes that advice and it like goes well and he's able to make friends and stuff. And I can definitely feel that where, it felt like a really fresh start in college. It was like, oh, like you're into this too? Like sick. Like I was into Arrested Development. And I didn't know anyone else that had seen that show. And then in college, everyone was like talking about Arrested Development. I was like, oh my gosh, they know what that is. Like,
No, so I didn't know anyone who watched The Office.
Yeah, me
which
either.
Which is so weird because The Office is like the biggest show now. The Office and Friends.
Yeah, but not at the time.
Yeah,
it was like a little more niche.
There's a time lapse recording of us in college during this. Well, we were building a set.
Yeah.
That's why the time lapse was going. But while building the set, a group of us ended up having this conversation about watching The Office, and I was like, "You guys watch The Office too?" I watched The Office. Like, it was just such a thing. Yeah, because it wasn't
a thing that everyone did.
Yeah.
And just, all those kind of nerdy sort of things like, oh, Seinfeld, Arrested Development, like those like specific movies that maybe not everyone had seen. It was like, oh, you've seen this too. I've seen this too. And it was just so fun to connect with people in a way that felt real instead of maybe like, I don't know.
And to fall in love.
To fall in love.
Yeah. So for all those reasons and more, I've connected with this a lot more than Lady Bird, which I would say is a similar kind of movie.
It's pretty similar.
Not quite the same topics, but
it's about like maybe kind of being a jerk in the beginning and then kind of like finding yourself and going to college and stuff. But I think this is how I feel. Is like every 17-year-old is kind of a jerk. Yeah. Like I felt that way about Rushmore. I talked about this on Carl and Gabe's podcast. Is they're like, oh, we didn't like Max Fisher. He's kind of unlikable. I'm like, yeah, that's the point. Like every 17-year-old is really annoying because they think they're like cool and they know everything.
Yeah.
And so I found this character of Lawrence really refreshing because he felt fairly genuine.
Yeah. I like flawed characters that still give you a reason to root for them. I don't like flawed characters that don't give you a reason to root for them, like Howard in Uncut Gems. But Lawrence,
pretty
like
annoying,
he's like at his core, he's a movie fan and he wants friends and he's socially awkward. You want to see him make friends and succeed and have a good life.
I don't think he's necessarily always trying to be a jerk. I think he just feels like he knows best.
Yeah.
Or he's saying what he's thinking and maybe he should just like keep it to himself. You know what I mean? He doesn't have the bedside manners to be like, oh, like I think this, but I'm not going to say anything because I'm not going to hurt someone's feelings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would give it a pretty easy 8 out of 10 or 4 out of 5. What about you?
I think especially because it was like a Canadian indie film and I could relate to it in such a specific way being an Ontarian.
Yeah.
it was certainly an 8, and I'm excited to see what this director does in the future. And
Absolutely.
Yay for female directors.
Yeah. Especially like when you told me about it, you were like, oh, it's a Canadian indie film shot around like the GTA. I was thinking like, oh, well, I just made myself a Canadian indie film this past year, so I'll be in good company here. And I watched it, and then I was like, especially watching the credits, I was like, okay, this is a whole class above me here. We're not in the same league.
Well,
Coffee to Cocktails.
I think they were at like TIFF. Yeah. Like, oh, our budget was a couple $100, whereas
I spent about $470
like
on Coffee to Cocktails.
I like movies you can tell they had a sizable budget. Like it was still like a small story they were telling.
Yeah.
But there was
it was well
stuff
made.
there. It was like good
Definitely
production
well made.
value. It was maybe like $1 million. I have no idea what the budget was. I don't think you can find it online. But they clearly had a lot of sponsors and a lot of people backing them. But you got to start somewhere, you know? So
For
like
sure.
you made your first film for 400, maybe the next one can
At
be
400 and a lot of favors. A lot of people
4,000,
donating
you know?
their time.
Oh, for sure, you know. But like, yeah. You know, she had, I think the director comes from a background of being a film critic, so she probably had a lot of industry contacts.
Potentially, yeah. I'd be interested to know how that all came together. So on the topic of filmmaking, we've been doing more of that in the past, you know,
feels good.
8 months to a year and stuff.
Yeah.
Contributing more Kino stuff. I want to do more of that.
Me too.
And we're looking at interviewing more people from the Kino crowd. So keep an eye out for that. Really looking forward to getting to know some of those people better. I have a list.
It's a local Ottawa scene. I'm not sure if we mentioned that before. Kino.
Well, we talked about it with Ben Bergeron.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, because we kind of found him a little bit through that.
For
indirectly. Sure. But I've got a short list here of just random cue cards, index cards that I've been writing on of just stuff that I want to do in the future. Not even stuff related to like plot, but just like filmmaking techniques. And you can. I didn't prompt you about this beforehand, so it's okay if you don't have any. But feel free to also contribute some stuff that you're interested in doing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So one was light a scene with a lava lamp.
Yes. I saw that and I was like, that's sick. Let's do this.
Yeah. Obviously, like, lava lamps don't put off a lot of light, but, you know, like, have a practical light lava lamp and then fill in light from a different light source.
I think cameras are fairly powerful these days that you can get away with fairly minimal light, whereas I feel like with older cameras, maybe that's not the case. Right. So, we'll see.
I want to experiment with slow motion some more.
Yes.
I did that during the cocktail making scenes in Coffee to Cocktails.
Those were some of, like, the best moments in that movie, I think.
Well, yeah.
The most...
all the scenes without dialogue.
And no, they were the most accessible because they had a lot of visual flair to them, whereas a lot of the other scenes were more like talking heads.
Yeah, want to do fun stuff like that. Selective coloring is something that we saw in Death on the Nile with some of the flashbacks with like the red coat being thrown. It's really cool.
I love that. Yeah. But it has to be used in a very specific way. Otherwise, it reminds me of people editing their photos in like the early 2000s on Facebook.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I would have loved... I never saw the movie adaptation of The Giver, even though I read the book.
Oh, yeah, me either.
But I always pictured The Giver being that way.
Selective coloring.
Well, because his world is supposed to be in black and white without any color. And then, like, I think there's a scene of someone throwing a ball or, like, his love interest's hair. There's, like, a flash. And he describes it as a flash, but it's him starting to see color. That's how I always pictured The Giver would be in a movie adaptation. I don't think they did that, but...
I feel like that's such a important aspect to telling that story, though, that I feel like that is missing. I feel like in Schindler's List, though, they play with selective coloring. So maybe we should watch that.
Definitely.
To gain inspiration.
I want to try a car chase.
Yes.
And maybe we should practice that in a short film before we throw it into a feature.
That is the most daunting because it's not easy to do on an indie scale.
Right. Because
it involves like a stunt that could potentially be dangerous if it goes wrong. So that is definitely the more daunting. I think it can be done on a smaller scale, but that's definitely like I don't know, but yeah. That would be great to do.
We know someone who I think would be interested in filming a car chase scene who has like a 360 camera and enjoys drifting. So that would be really cool. That's true.
Yes, and I know exactly what project would be fitting for it in the future. So
I'd love to showcase fashion some more.
Yes.
Because on a low budget level...
I'm in my petticoat era.
Yeah. On a low budget level, you're pretty much just asking your actors to take a picture of their closet and picking something from there. I would love to do a project where I could actually take the actors out shopping and pick stuff from there and like try on stuff.
That'd be so fun.
That would be fun. Unique POV shots.
Mm-hmm. I love just to talk about that a little bit more. I'm a really big fashion buff, in particular historical fashion. So I love the idea of having like a period piece and dressing everyone up in like 1930s clothes or something. That'd be so fun.
Yes. Unique POV shots, kind of like Better Call Saul.
Yes.
Or Breaking Bad. Just like shots like from the perspective of a glass or something. I would love to experiment with that more.
Excuse my reference. In Corner Gas, some of the directors would do that where they would have the POVs of like someone opening a fridge or like a closet or something, or like they were digging a hole in the ground and it was from that perspective. Yeah. They always had really interesting POVs, and I love the idea of playing around with that. I'm very pro creative flair.
For sure. I'd love to do some filming with the drone. I've been flying drone.
Yes.
Been flying drone for about 5 years.
You're very proficient.
I appreciate it. I have yet to put any drone work into an actual like non-corporate project.
I feel like that needs to, like, you need to be emphasizing that skill more because you are really skilled at it, and I feel like that is such a like a pat on your back, like such an easy visual flair moment to incorporate in things.
Well,
and
I don't want it to be forced. More of it. I really don't want it to be forced. I don't want the shot to be like, look, everybody, I have a drone. You know, like
still though, it's still, you know,
yeah. Well, especially on when we come to
an indie level, it's impressive.
Yeah. And then I think it would be really funny to shoot a fight scene where the people fighting are wearing pajamas.
That sounds fun.
Like nice, like matching set, like flannel button-up pajamas. Something about that to me is just really humorous.
You definitely should write that in.
Yeah.
I feel like that's an ongoing trope in Wes Anderson films is there's almost always a fight and the people in the fight are bad at fighting. That's like a thing where they're like not good at it. Yeah. So I think that would be really funny. Like I think with comedy, it's like subverting expectations. So I think that idea of doing something aggressive in something that's kind of whimsical is a great idea.
Definitely. Any final thoughts on I Like Movies and just filmmaking in general? Because it inspired me, you know, like seeing a kid being like who wants to go to film school and stuff. It reminded me about why I got into it in the first place.
Mm-hmm. I love watching a good movie that resonates deeply with you, especially like smaller indie films about filmmaking, like Shirkers, which is another indie film about they made a movie and they lost the movie and they were trying to find it. Really great movie as well to watch. I love movies like that where you're like, I just want to get out and make something. Yeah. I want to do it. I felt that way watching Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. I was like, this movie is just so good. I just want to watch more movies that are so good. I don't want to do something. Like, it's so great when art connects to you in such a personal way. And I feel like in art, I love how personal it is and how special and unique it is and how you can draw from so many different inspirations. That to me is why I got into filmmaking. Not necessarily because I like watching movies, which I do, is creating something special that only could have come from you because you're seeing the world in a very specific way and you have a very specific amount of references and tastes. And that's what makes making art and films so exciting and fun. And what about you, Andrew? What do you think of everything?
Well, I appreciate your perspective, Hannah. Thanks for putting it so eloquently. And I think it's a great note to end on. So look forward to the next episode where we're going to be talking about something else.
Yeah.